Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to stay updated with our latest videos. Danielle Colby, the beloved star of American Pickers, has finally spoken out about the rumors that have been going around about her former co-star Fritz. Fans have been wondering for years what really happened when he left the hit History Channel show, which has led to many rumors about personal problems and alleged feuds behind the scenes. While Mike Wolfe has talked about Frank's absence, Danielle Colby has finally spoken out. Danielle has mostly kept quiet until now, when she finally breaks her silence in an honest and shocking way, giving information about their relationship. Even diehard fans may be shocked by what she says about Frank's health and the future of American Pickers. The start of American Pickers. Before it started on TV in 2010, American Pickers had a long history. Mike Wolfe, a lifelong picker with a deep appreciation for old treasures, created it. From a young age, Mike had a knack for finding hidden gems in people's barns, garages, and backyards, turning unwanted items into valuable collectibles. He aspired to create a show that explored this distinct subculture, revealing history through the remnants left by individuals. Mike needed a partner to realize his dream, and Fritz was the perfect fit. Mike and Fritz, childhood friends from Davenport, Iowa, both loved antiques and collectibles. Frank loved old toys, rusty gold motorbike signs, and other unique items. Their different styles worked well together, making them a fantastic team for the show. Together, they went across America knocking on doors, digging through old sheds, and finding lost pieces of history. But American Pickers wasn't just about the guys on the road, it needed a strong anchor back at home. Enter Danielle Colby. With her outgoing personality, extensive knowledge of vintage items, and sharp negotiation skills, she became the backbone of the operation, working at Antique Archaeology, the store that served as the Pickers' headquarters. While Mike and Frank were out in the field, Danielle managed the business side and ensured the store had their latest finds. The three of them became instant hits when the History Channel picked up American Pickers. Their dynamic was new and interesting. Mike was the adventurous, daring one, Frank was the cautious but knowledgeable collector, and Danielle was the edgy, tattooed manager who made sure everything ran smoothly. Their chemistry felt real, and viewers were drawn to their friendship, humor, and shared love of finding America's hidden treasures. At its core, American Pickers wasn't just about antiques, it was about stories. Every item had a history, and every stop on their journey introduced viewers to fascinating people with incredible stories. That the show did well showed that people wanted this kind of adventure, and many people knew Frank and Danielle from American Pickers, but their relationship wasn't always as smooth off-screen. As the years went by, cracks started to show in Mike and Frank's once tight bond. Frank and Danielle's simple picking business turned into a huge TV empire, but with success came problems that would eventually cause heartbreak, controversy, and Frank's departure. American Pickers became a giant hit when it premiered on the History Channel on January 18, 2010, and it quickly became one of the network's biggest hits. People were interested in the show because it had a unique premise: two lifelong friends travel across America in search of forgotten treasures hidden in barns, attics, and junkyards. But what really drew people in was the chemistry between Mike Wolfe, Fritz, and Danielle Colby. Their interactions felt natural, their love for antiques was real, and their ability to find intriguing stories made every episode an exciting journey through history. Mike and Frank were the show's faces, but they were entirely unique people. Mike was the enthusiastic and charismatic leader who was always ready to take risks and make tough deals. He knew a lot about picking and was always on the lookout for the best items. Frank, on the other hand, was the skeptic but experienced collector. He knew a lot about old toys, oil cans, and signs, and his straightforward attitude balanced out Mike's lively personality. Fans loved their friendly banter, whether it was about prices, condition, or who got the best deal. When Danielle wasn't on the road with Mike and Frank, she was critical to the show's success as the manager of Antique Archaeology. She made sure everything went smoothly. tracked down and often surprised people with how much she knew about collectibles and how beautiful she was. With tattoos and a wild personality, Danielle was unique in the world of antiques, which made her a fan favorite on her own. Finding expensive items wasn't the only thing that made the show interesting, it was also learning about history. Each object had a story, and American Pickers made sure to show the people behind the antiques. It could be a retired race car driver selling souvenirs from his past or an older couple selling a number of old signs. Mike and Frank were interested in and respectful of what they found. American Pickers' emotional connection to history sets it apart from other reality shows, elevating it beyond mere buying and selling. Over the years, the show's popularity led to spin-offs, international versions, and even cameos by famous collectors, car fans, or musicians who wanted to share their love of old things. Mike used the show for more than just fun. Frank and Danielle's show became a full-fledged cultural phenomenon. But as the show's fame grew, so did the stress. With more work to do, more travel, and higher expectations, tension began to rise behind the scenes, even though viewers saw a close-knit trio on TV. The truth was much more complicated, and Frank was already having emotional and health problems. The stress and fame of the show would soon take a heavy toll on him. American Pickers showed a close-knit group of friends who loved finding lost treasures. But behind the scenes, the relationships between Mike Wolf, Frank Fritz, and Danielle Colby were much more complicated than they seemed. Years of working together built their bond, but the demands of fame, business, and personal problems gradually weakened it. The show focused on Mike and Frank's friendship, which began in childhood and lasted decades before they got a TV deal. Their different personalities made for excellent TV. Frank was more cautious and realistic, while Mike was always pushing to get things done. But as the show's popularity grew, their friendship started to change. Mike became more of a leader as the face of American Pickers and the show's executive producer. The position gave him more control over the show's direction, which some think led to a growing rift between him and Frank. On the other hand, Danielle played an interesting role in their relationship, acting as the unifying force that kept antique archaeology together. She worked closely with both men on logistics negotiations and research, and while she had a lot of respect for both Mike and Frank, she was often caught in the middle of their fights. Although Danielle was an expert on antiques, she was also interested in fashion and burlesque dancing, which made her feel like an outsider in the more male-dominated picking culture. However, she consistently ensured her voice received attention. As rumors of tension between Frank and Mike grew, fans began to notice small changes. Frank showing up in promotional materials less often, the two of them interacting with each other less often, and the show's general dynamic changing. Some individuals believed that Mike was neglecting Frank as he concentrated on expanding the American Pickers brand. However, neither Mike nor Frank discussed any problems going on behind the scenes at the time. One important sign of more profound problems was when Frank started taking longer breaks from shooting. The official reason given was that he was having personal health problems. Many people wondered if there was more to the story. As time went on, it became clear that Frank's part in American Pickers was shrinking. Danielle, who was close to both men, decided to stay quiet rather than take sides. The stresses of growing the reality TV business and their own personal problems gradually tested their personal relationships, which had been built on years of shared experiences. Bringing about a big change for the show: Frank Fritz's health problems and struggles. As American Pickers became more popular, Frank Fritz had to deal with a number of personal problems that had a big effect on both his part on the show and his life off-screen. Frank had health problems that had been bothering him for a long time. One of the worst was Crohn's disease, a chronic inflammatory bowel condition he had been fighting since he was in his early 20s. He rarely discussed it on American Pickers, but he did mention that it made travel and long work hours difficult. Crohn's disease can cause severe pain, fatigue, and weight loss, and fans noticed changes in Frank's appearance throughout the show's run. At one point, his dramatic weight loss even made viewers worried, so he went public with his health problems to put an end to the rumors. Frank struggled with alcohol, which significantly contributed to his decision to leave American Pickers. American Pickers. His drinking reportedly became a problem for people close to him, and he eventually went to rehab to try to get his life back under control. In an honest interview, he talked about this. Later, Frank admitted that he had spent time in an Iowa treatment center working on his addiction. He was proud of his sobriety journey and said he hoped to be able to return to the show once he was better. However, his time away from American Pickers made things worse between him and Mike Wolfe. While Frank focused on his health, Mike continued to grow the show and the American Pickers brand. By the time Frank was ready to return, it was clear that things were no longer the same, which made his problems even worse. Frank also lost people close to him. He had a hard split with his longtime girlfriend, which made his emotional problems worse. Because of all of his health problems, personal problems and job insecurity caused a storm of problems that would ultimately push him further away from the show that made him famous. Despite his problems, Frank stayed hopeful that he could make a comeback. He told Mike and Danielle that he wanted to get back together with them and keep doing what he loved, picking up antiques and finding hidden treasures. But behind the scenes, things were much more complicated. His health and personal problems had changed the course of his career, and his future with American Pickers was now hanging by a thread. Frank Fritz's departure from American Pickers. As Frank Fritz's health struggles continued, his absence from American Pickers became more pronounced. At first, fans believed he was taking a temporary break to focus on his recovery. However, as new episodes aired without him and Mike Wolfe took on a more dominant role, speculation grew that Frank's time on the show had come to an end. For years, Frank had been an integral part of the American Pickers team. His deep knowledge of antiques, his eye for vintage signs and oil cans, and his humorous banter with Mike made him a fan favorite. However, as his health and personal battles took a toll, his relationship with Mike became strained. While Frank still hoped to return, it became increasingly clear that the show was moving forward without him. In July 2021, after much speculation, the History Channel officially announced that Frank would not be returning to American Pickers. The news disappointed many longtime fans who had grown attached to his dynamic with Mike. However, the most shocking part was not just Frank's exit, it was reaction to it. Shortly after the announcement, Frank spoke out publicly expressing his frustration over how things had been handled. He revealed that he hadn't spoken to Mike in nearly 2 years, suggesting that their once close friendship had completely deteriorated. Frank claimed that he felt abandoned by Mike and that the show had moved on without giving him a fair chance to return. His words hinted at a deep sense of betrayal. As he had expected more support from his longtime friend, fans were divided over the situation. Some sided with Frank, believing he had been unfairly pushed out of the show. Others knew that American Pickers had to go on with or without Frank, but it was clear that his departure was a big change for the show. The chemistry that had made it popular wasn't there anymore, and Frank's absence was felt. Danielle Colby, who was close to both men, stayed out of the drama for the most part. However, she later expressed her pain at witnessing her coworkers part ways. She stressed that she cared deeply about both Mike and Frank and hoped that they could fix their relationship over time, but the damage had already been done. Even though American Pickers still had a loyal audience, many fans couldn't get rid of the feeling that something was missing. Meanwhile, Frank's life after the show was still unknown as he continued to deal with health problems and work on his recovery. That being said, no one knew the story was far from over. Soon, the American Pickers community would hear even more sad news. Fans were waiting for Danielle Colby's response to the rumors that Frank Fritz was leaving American Pickers. Danielle is known for being loyal and having a strong presence on the show. She had always been the link between Mike Wolfe and Frank, but as tensions rose and rumors spread, she finally broke her silence and gave a heartfelt but carefully worded statement about the situation. "I'm truly sorry about Frank's death on the show," Colby said. "I'm so sorry for his problems. I've seen it all happen over the last 10 years. I have a lot of thoughts, but I won't say them because they are just my thoughts and not the truth. I wish things could have been different, but we must take responsibility for our actions when they cause instability or pain and suffering to others. Her words, while kind, hinted at the deeper problems behind Frank's departure. She admitted that it was hard to see her longtime friend struggle and that personal accountability played a big part in his decision to leave the show. It was a rare moment of honesty that confirmed what many fans already thought. Frank's problems got worse. Frank caused so much pain for himself, not just his health problems, that it has been hard to watch. Colby went on, "I really hope Frank gets all the help he needs to get better after being sick for years. It's not my place to say bad things about someone who needs help, so I'll keep my comments positive. I'm sending love to everyone," she said, showing both care and distance. It was clear that she cared about Frank and wanted him to get better, but it was also clear that his problems had affected those around him. In contrast, Frank's words showed anger and betrayal. Danielle's words seemed to show that she was more willing to accept what was happening. Colby also made it clear that she wasn't taking sides and wasn't going to ignore what was happening. She wrote, "The only reason I'm speaking to this right now is because everyone is speculating on my words and my words are being taken out of context in tabloid rags because they can't interview me because I will not interview with a tabloid rag. Therefore, if you want to know how I feel, here it is. I hope everyone gets better and continues to love each other even through the hard times." Her message made it clear that she wasn't taking sides but also wasn't going to ignore the truth. It was an acknowledgement of the pain and difficulty of seeing a close friend struggle while also emphasizing that Frank was the one who had to grow and heal. Danielle's words gave a rare look into how Frank's leaving had affected the people who worked closely with him. Even though she wished him well, it was clear that his problems had left deep wounds that might never fully heal. Frank Fritz talks about the fight he had with Mike Wolfe many years ago. When Mike Wolfe and Frank Fritz worked together on American Pickers, they had great chemistry, which was a big part of the show's success. Mike often led negotiations, while Frank was great at finding hidden gems. But after Frank left, it was clear that their friendship had taken a serious hit, and Frank said that the cracks had been there for a while in a rare and honest interview. Frank finally talked about the rumors about his leaving and his troubled friendship with Mike. His words, which were full of sadness and anger, showed how far apart the two former co-stars had become. "I haven't talked to Mike in 2 years. Frank admitted he knew my back was messed up but he didn't call me up and ask how I was doing. That's just how it is." The revelation shocked fans as many had assumed that despite Frank's absence from the show he and Mike still maintained some form of communication, but Frank's words suggested otherwise. Not only had they not spoken in years but he felt abandoned during a time when he was struggling with health issues. While Frank didn't go into specific details about why he was removed from the show, he made it clear that he felt sidelined. "I was in second place on American Pickers," he stated bluntly. For those who had followed the show from the beginning, this statement was a surprising contrast to how things had once been. Early on, American Pickers had showcased Mike and Frank as equals, two best friends traveling across America sharing a passion for antiques, but over time fans noticed that Mike seemed to take a more prominent role while Frank's appearances became less frequent. His words now confirmed what many had said, suspected he had felt like he was being pushed aside. Mike also spoke out after Frank's words, but his tone was much more friendly and nostalgic. "I've known Frank for as long as I can remember. He's been like a brother to me." Mike wrote, "The journey that Frank, Danny and I began in 2009. It has had its ups and downs, good times and bad, and triumphs and tragedies, but it has also been the most fulfilling." Mike's statement made it sound like he still valued what they had created together, but he didn't directly address Frank's claims that he felt left behind or like he was in second place. Instead, his words sounded like he was thankful rather than sorry, which made some fans wonder if he really understood how upset Frank was. Mike and Frank's falling out was a sad turning point for American Pickers and its longtime fans. What had once been a story of two best friends following their passion had become a story of distance, misunderstandings and unspoken tensions. Frank still held on to hope that he might one day return to the show, but the growing distance between him and Mike made that possibility seem less likely with each passing day. The tragic death of Frank Fritz. For years, fans of American Pickers had followed Frank Fritz's journey from his early days on the show to his personal problems and eventual departure. They thought he would find his way back to television or at least make peace with Mike Wolfe and his former co-workers. When the news came out in September 2024, fans were shocked. Frank Fritz had died. Frank's health had been a concern for a while. He had openly talked about his battle with Crohn's disease. After leaving American Pickers, he had more health problems, including a stroke in July 2022. The stroke left him in a vulnerable state and required extended medical care and rehabilitation. At the time, reports said he was having a hard time recovering, but fans hoped he would eventually get stronger. Unfortunately, Frank's health got worse in the months before he died. While details about his last days were kept secret, people who knew him well said that he had never fully recovered from the stroke. Years of personal problems on top of his health problems had taken a big toll. There was shock in the American Pickers community when the news of his death came out. Fans, former co-workers, and friends shared their grief and talked about how Frank had affected the show and their lives. Many remembered him as the down-to-earth, funny, and knowledgeable picker with an undeniable passion for antiques. Even people who hadn't seen him in years couldn't deny the lasting impression he had left. One of the most anticipated responses was from Mike Wolfe, because of their falling out. When he finally broke his silence, his words were full of sadness and reflection. That was the end of an era for American Pickers and its loyal fans. Frank hadn't been on the show in years, but he was still very much in the thoughts of those who had followed his journey. As tributes poured in, it became clear that Frank Fritz had made a lasting impact. Even though his journey may have been hard, he will always be remembered as one of the greats in the world of picking. Forever remembered as one of the original pickers with a keen eye for treasures and an undeniable charm. From co-founding American Pickers to his struggles and tragic death, Frank Fritz's life was full of ups and downs. His feud with Mike Wolfe and his personal problems overshadowed his later years, but fans will always remember him for his sense of humor, love of antiques, and unwavering influence on the show. His legacy as an original picker lives on, reminding us of the friendships, problems, and successes that shaped his life as we think back on it. Which American Pickers scenes do you remember him from the most? Leave your ideas and tributes below, and we'll see you next time.